Hi, Sue. Thank you so much for talking today. Can you take a minute to introduce yourself, tell us what you do and who you work with?
Sure. My name is Sue Khammar. I'm an occupational therapist, and I have been one for 34 years now. I have done everything from adults to pediatrics over the course of my career and eventually landed in pediatric specialty. And I opened my own private practice in 2013 here in Fort Worth, Texas, Cowtown Pediatrics Clinic, which has evolved into an outpatient pediatric occupational and speech therapy clinic. And we serve children with developmental delays, autism spectrum, learning differences, and we're pretty much developmental specialists in pediatrics.
Sue, can you walk us through what an ideal curriculum progression might look like from preschool through middle school?
Sure. There is a lot going on in childhood as far as brain development goes. And so, from a curriculum standpoint, just being mindful of what is developmentally appropriate age by age from early learning towards the older child. In general, the more multisensory approach you give, like what you think of in typical preschools, as far as hear it, see it, feel it, touch it, live it, completely experiential, works beautifully with any age, but it is the go-to method for the younger child. So if you have a child from preschool through, first grade, maybe that's the arena I would be living in for sure. So if
Okay.
curriculum had paper pencil or coloring, cutting, gluing tasks, I would still have a tangible manipulative to deal with, not just the paper pencil or reading based book. As the child gets older, you progress to what we call the two-dimensional model. So you come out of the three-dimensional world and you go into the two-dimensional world, which is your traditional books, paper, pencil, and everything, just because from a brain development standpoint, the child is ready for that. Reading, writing, math, those types of things.
What are the potential risks of introducing an overly advanced or difficult curriculum too early, such as in the elementary years?
You will see behaviors. Very short, very simple. You will know very quickly because children are literal and children will tell you. Whether they tell you verbatim in, words, they're never going to come out and say, this is too difficult. They're going
Yeah.
to act silly. What we call escape avoid behaviors, but you can not participate in the task at hand, whatever you're trying to teach them, by being silly to get out of it, by being outright angry, defiant to get out of it, by talking your ear off, because that ultimately gets them out of the task that's at hand. So behaviors don't have to be negative for a child to successfully not participate in what you've presented to them. So just I say a close observation and, base your observations over time, not just a one-off, because kids can have a bad day. That's what I would say. You're going to know pretty quickly. It's not going to be a mystery. If they're not catching on and they're not willing to participate or unable to participate or whatever, they're going to let you know pretty quick.
Okay, so if they think they can't handle the curriculum, the task at hand, they're going to start acting out to avoid it. I think I like knowing that it's not always a negative behavior that we're going to see if a child doesn't feel that they can handle what's presented to them.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest key is
Yeah.
that I think the biggest assumption is that all behaviors are negative,
Yep.
and it's not. It's from positive to negative and everything in between. And what you're really assessing is, are they doing the task that you presented to them, or are they not doing the task? It's literally that simple.
Okay, so going off of that answer, if we introduce a curriculum that's too difficult, too early, too young, how can that impact our child's love of learning later on?
I think overall, if a child has a negative experience for whatever reason, and it's academically based, and you start to see a child's self-worth and self-esteem start to dwindle.
Yeah.
And in my experience, if everything is typically developing, children are in general happy children. In general, children aim to please adults in their world. And so when you start to see a child who's unhappy, who doesn't want to participate in school, who doesn't want to do these things, that's not typical if everything else is going around. going along okay. So just making sure everything you do within the educational realm, and I would assume it's the true in the parenting realm, is build your child's self-esteem, build your child's exposure to variety so that they can test out. Your child's not going to like everything you present to them. So just staying as a homeschooler, have your approach be variable so that you keep the child's attention and you keep their interests going.
So, if we start seeing some of those avoidance behaviors from our child and think the curriculum might be a little too difficult for where they are right now, do we have permission as homeschooling parents to back off a little bit, work on some simpler things, build their self esteem, and then increase difficulty again once the child seems ready?
I think you have permission to reevaluate the situation. So I think if it's kind of like two paths. So if it is simply you're doing too much and it's too hard, too heavy, too much, and the kid is typically developing, then absolutely you downgrade and you get to the level and meet them where they're at,
Yeah.
and you teach from there. And you're going to see that based on behaviors, and you're going to see that based on their learning content is going to match. Like if
Yeah.
you're teaching phonics or math or this or that, they're going to get the concepts, right? If, however, your approach is not too hard, too fast, the curriculum's not too hard, they should be getting this by now,
Yeah.
something's not right, then you diverge and you figure out what the issue is, because it's not the child's problem and it's not the parent's problem. There's something else going on. And the other thing is just that, like, me as a professional, I specialize in dysgraphia, disorders of written communication. So if you've used all the tools in your toolbox that you know how to teach a subject or this, that, and it's just not chugging along like you think it should be, then, reach out for help. Maybe your child, has a learning issue or a diagnosis in there or something like that that's not yet been discovered. But there's definitely certain peak times along the academic curriculum where things become evident. And the biggest one and the most common one that people know are like a dyslexia. Say your child is struggling to learn how to read. A preschooler doesn't have dyslexia because they haven't been taught to read yet. They're not developmentally ready to read yet. You don't figure that out until a little while through, maybe first grade, second grade, it's bubbling up. So there are things that can come along, might not have been there when you started, and that's normal. That's normal development. So just reach out for help, reach out to your healthcare provider if you think something's not typical.
Okay, that's super helpful. Can you elaborate a little bit more on why it's important to build a child's self-esteem in the learning environment?
All behavior is repeated if the motivation is rewarding, if that makes sense. So if you enjoy learning, you are going to seek out more learning. So, and that applies to any behavior across the spectrum, but keeping a child's self-esteem happy and worthy and fulfilled and excited and loved and nurtured and all that, you just open the mind up to a child who wants to just absorb everything that you can teach them. If you have a child that's just pure love for learning and you're a homeschool parent, they're going to not only seek out learning during curriculum time, right? They're going to seek out learning during playtime. They're going to seek out learning with their friends. They're going to seek out learning in every avenue possible because it's self-motivating. If it wasn't that, then you would just see that repeated behavior only during that time. Like if the child really didn't love to learn, but they were compliant and intelligent, capable of learning, they might only do it during academic time and go, do something else at a different time. But everything a child does in childhood is learning, I believe. You're growing that brain and your life experiences through all of your everyday experiences. There was a book, Everything I Ever Needed to Learn, I learned in kindergarten, and it was written, way generations back.
Yeah.
It still holds true because truly the most important things in life are those foundational things, like your development of your social skills and your communication and your manners and how you interact and all and how your response to change is and your coping skills and sharing and
Yep.
playing, as long as you're on track with what's known for an eighth grader, for a fifth grader, for a
Mhm.
preschooler, and those kinds of things, and you are presenting the material in a varied way that engages your child and keeps your child's enthusiasm there and can guide them through what they're on track to learn, you're great. You don't have to rush everything down to younger and younger and be 2 years advanced. One of the harms of doing too much for a child in the early years is truly the brain's not there. Like certain things are just literally aren't even developed, right? And you can see that the younger the child gets because it doesn't exist yet in the brain, right? But as you get to your older child, if you are always rushing, 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 and let's just say that like you're all done with high school in eighth grade and you're ready to go to college, well, there's a reason why an eighth grader isn't living on a college campus. And so equally as important of what curriculum you're putting in front of them is uh, who are the friends, who are they playing with, what are your children doing, and are you getting good sleep and nutritious food? And it's the whole picture. The academics are important, but it's not just the academics. So I think keeping the whole picture, the holistic viewpoint, is equally as important, I think, for parents. Kids are smart. Kids have the answers. They tell you right there and then. If it's just if you're smart enough to understand what they're telling you. But kids are
Yeah.
wired to get what they need when they need it. And that's not a negative comment. They really are very, and it's us who overthink everything or have a plan and can't divert from our plan or have a preconceived notion this might be too easy or too hard and before you even try it. So
What is the most important tip you would give parents to make learning joyful and engaging?
be happy. Know yourself. I don't wake up happy. I need my cup of coffee in the morning. In general, I'm a happy person, but just be aware of what tone of voice, what your body language says. Come to the table. If you want somebody to learn, think about what I want to learn from me, and think about that because I think that's half of it. If you have joy and you spread joy, you're going to have a joyful environment. If you're angry and cranky and then your kid is angry and cranky and then none of it's fun, that's not easy to do all the time. But I'm just saying be cognizant
Yeah.
when, as a homeschool parent, you might be wearing a mom hat, but then you're wearing the teacher hat. And so you're one person, but if you're jumping into that teacher role, put that hat on and, kind of fake it till you make it because it's important. Your child will perceive that. The job of all children is play. Play is the job. And so you learn and you grow and develop every part of your brain and body and cognition. They all learns through play. So use play while teaching and you will get more retention, memory, focus than you will if it's rote.
So, what kind of educational activities encourage curiosity versus discourage curiosity? And I'm thinking the difference between things like hands on activities versus tests, written exams, that kind of thing.
I think that's why you go back and you remember science lab, right? Who knows what
Mhm.
you were doing in science lab, but it was different than sitting at the table and listening to somebody at the front, lecture or something or taking a note. So hands-on experiential learning with mixed with some, follow-up digital or paper pencil type, not testing, but proving to see if you've learned the content is
Yeah,
usually more engaging than just sitting and listening. So,
perfect.
multi-sensory approach.
So, if I have a child who seems like they're burnt out on learning, doesn't really love it right now, do you have any tips on how to bring back and encourage a love of learning?
I don't think kids ever hate learning or are burnt out learning. I think the mechanism in which academics is being taught might be the wrong format.
Yeah.
So I would just say go back and reassess the format, make sure there isn't anything going on that's non-typically developing with your child. You're not a doctor, you're not a psychologist, you're not, it's like just make sure you're targeting all of those things because in general, most kids don't hate learning. But a lot of kids struggle. A lot of kids struggle. So I'll say that as well. So just make sure you know what that struggle is and you seek out advice and all of that so that the experts in alternative teaching can help you implement strategies with your children.
Can you speak to when you think a parent should reach out for the help of a professional if they're having trouble teaching their child at?
There's a few key moments. For example, like when you're learning to read, and you're just not catching on. Learning to read is phonetically based. So if your children is not catching on to the sounds of letters and recognizing their ABCs and all of that kind of stuff around the first grade year is kind of when you see a break if something is typically developing or not.
Okay.
By third grade, by the end of third grade, you should no longer be learning to read or learning to write. You should be writing and reading to learn. So those are two big triggers. And then come like eighth grade, you really don't, like when you get towards algebra and stuff like that, you really have to have abstract thinking in order to do those things because they're no longer tangible. So if you're struggling with that, there might be a working memory issue or an attentional issue or, something else going on. Because typically developing, you wouldn't introduce calculus to a first grader. There's a reason why, So those are some big milestones. But just if you've tried to teach a concept over and over in many, many different ways, and they're not getting it, and your child is smart, because verbally they talk to you and they know all these things, but once you get to the topic, it kind of all falls apart. That's when I would seek out some kind of, just help.
If someone was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and wanted to reach out, ask you a question, come see you, where can they find you?
Sure. You can look us up on the internet. Our webpage is www.cowtownpediatricsclinic.com. And unfortunately, pediatrics is spelled with an X, not a CS, just to make it complicated. Or you can email us at office@cowtownpediatricsclinic.com and just find us on the web and inquire.
That's perfect. Sue, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.